Mudar Pratap Singh, you're joining us on NewsX. Our big story: India has failed to map the spread of the Delta variant of coronavirus through genome sequencing in early 2021, contributing to an explosion of cases in the summer that resulted in a deadly second wave of the pandemic. Now, almost a year later, a new variant of the coronavirus, Omicron, has entered the country, first detected in South Africa and Botswana. It's believed to be even more transmissible than Delta. Fortunately, there is a simpler way to track Omicron's spread: the S-gene target failure test. But in India, the Government Union Health Secretary has advised states to adopt a dual RT-PCR testing strategy ahead of genome sequencing of COVID-positive samples for Omicron detection. Under the new plan, suspected patients' throats, nasal swab samples will be tested using a standard RT-PCR kit, and if detected positive, the same sample will undergo a second test with an imported RT-PCR kit having an S-gene drop. This process is much longer. The question then is, why can't we directly go for an S-gene test, and why are the samples being sent to Pune for genome testing? Can't they be done in the states themselves? Joining us at this point live is Padma Shri Dr. Mohsin Wali, cardiologist and physician. We also have Dr. Anil Arora, Chairman, Institute of Liver, Gastroenterology and Pancreatico-Biliary Sciences at Gangaram Hospital. We also have Dr. Naresh Chawla, National Joint Secretary, IMA, and Vice President, Delhi Medical Council, joining us live. We also have Dr. PSV Rao, Consultant Surgeon, Columbia Asia Hospital, Hebal, Bengaluru, joining us on the broadcast. Let me begin with you, Dr. PSV Rao. Do you believe that we should go for these S-gene test kits immediately rather than a second round? And also the big question of why we're taking so long in sending the samples to Pune for genome sequencing, which takes quite a long time, rather than doing it just in their respective states?
In Bangalore itself, there are two places, two labs which are doing genome sequencing. So at least we don't need to send to Pune. I'm not sure which all places in India don't have the facility and are sending it to Pune. So the genome sequencing is being done in two labs, and nearly a month back, if I'm not clearly remembering the date, but the state government had announced that they are going to open another about 30 genome sequencing labs all over Karnataka. So that is as far as the genome sequencing is concerned. But anywhere in the world, you don't genome sequence every positive case. You ideally it is 1 in 10 cases, but in whenever there is a surge and there are too many cases, they are doing 1 in 20 cases. And it is wrong to say that we messed up with the Delta variant because we didn't do enough. When there is a huge surge, it's very difficult. But at the peak of the surge, we were not doing that many genome sequencing. But before that, we were. Only thing is we don't have the large number of labs required. If there is a surge, then you need more number of labs doing this RT-PCR test. And there are 3 target genes that we check in that. That is the surface, that is the S gene that you are talking about. Also the N gene and the E gene. E gene is the envelope gene, which is considered the more sensitive one. So if you are wanting to check in that itself, if it is likely to be Omicron, then what you get is you get a E positive, but you get a S negative. And that is what they are talking about. And then if it is S negative, you presume it is Omicron and then send it for gene sequencing. Gene sequencing is a more complicated thing where you actually sequence the nucleic acid sequence in the RNA of that particular virus. There are only 4 nucleic acids. The permutation combination of it produces various kinds of RNAs. So that is what that is about. And then our state government also has said that as far as the rapid tests are concerned, they have put various price, they fix the price for it so that those can be done. Those are the so-called rapid tests. Now, in the rapid test, you have the card tests, which are what you can do. You don't need to go to the lab. You can do it in an emergency. You can do it in anywhere. And then you have the tests which are done, molecular tests which are done in the lab. And these are collectively called the NAT tests, NAAT. And I don't want to go into too much technical details, but basically it tells you which rapidly, depending on the kit, it can tell you quickly as to which kind of virus is there. And there are NAT tests not just for coronavirus. There are multiplex this thing NAT tests which can tell you if it is influenza A, influenza B, or some other respiratory pathogen also. So these are the three different groups of tests. There is the gene sequencing, which is the ultimate. There is the RT-PCR, which is reliable. And then there is the rapid test, which will give you a rapid report. But depending on the type of from which company and which technology is being, which kind of test it is, it may give you quite accurate but very quick reports.
Okay. Let me in fact also quickly go across to Dr. Wali as well. Dr. Wali, what is your take on, of course, this genome sequencing happening only in Pune? I think in Delhi too, it's happening in Delhi, but there are certain centers where it doesn't happen, which is why it's taking so long to detect what the variant is. Do you also believe perhaps these S-gene tests are needed in the first round itself?
I agree, yes. As per INSACOG, one statement, 28 upgraded to 36 labs in India, all over India, which can do genome sequencing test. Okay. Now, why do we require this test? Let us understand this. When in South Africa, Omicron was detected, this was detected on the basis of RT-PCR test itself. As Dr. Venkatesh told, it has S gene, envelope gene, and nucleocapsid protein test. So 3 parts of this test, and they found out consistently that there was a S gene dropout in that test, which they were suspicious. And then because of that S gene dropout, why there is S gene dropout? Because there are so many mutations in the S gene, which they talked about later, and we said there are 50, 32 are important in the spike protein. So there were 32 mutations, if I say correctly, in S gene, spike protein gene. And then they resorted to doing the genomic study that they found this new Omicron virus. This is of purely academic interest to isolate those patients who have suffered from Omicron. We do not specify any treatment basis based on this test. This should be very clear. It's a time-consuming, expensive test, and what you have brought today in discussion is a shorter method, on-the-spot method, and detection by a kit, that is the test which catches this S gene. So this multi-target design includes S gene target, building sequencing confirmation. So S gene dropout can be used as a marker, which we were very initially talking to detect COVID. So this should be the ideal screening test, just like a full flight comes at the airport. Go for this S gene detection test and spot how many are showing S gene deficiency or how many are showing S gene dropout. Once this is clear, we might have to take some samples. You know, the testing of genomic sequencing has many finer points. One finer point is that logistics, which we have just now discussed, then substantial viral load is required, then awareness about collection, awareness about transportation, so that the genetic material is not wasted or is not destroyed. So there are standard operating procedures required to delicate the sample. Time of testing is also very important. Trained human resources are required. Those infected cases who do not go to the hospital, they are not subjected to any test at all. The transportation issue is very important because genetic material is very labile and very sensitive. So all this set together, we have to devise for the greater number of people as gene test kits should come in the market, and it would segregate the cases, and it would also tell us those who are COVID positive, suspected Omicron. Further, there is no use of doing this genomic sequencing. I would say very frankly, because the numbers which we are expecting, they will be beyond the capacity of any laboratory, even if we include the private laboratories. There is a suggestion which has not come into place that private laboratories which have facilities to do genomic testing should be incorporated or incorporated in this method. So summing up, we have enough facilities, but should be carefully chosen and carefully utilized. But the main onus lies on the public education, as we were discussing in the last segment of your program, previous program, and the onus lies upon the sensitization of masses. Let me tell you, the recent research which had come only 2-3 days back from South Africa, they have shown that it is a dying virus, and it will soon also show the same picture in a couple of weeks in India also. I pray that, I expect that, and this is replacing the Delta virus. So our whole attention should be the people's education. The masses should follow COVID appropriate behavior and let the government decide what test they are going to do in the next 2-3 weeks, because post New Year there will be a huge surge. People are not listening, people are crowding, people are going into eateries, there are functions, there are weddings, is still taking place. So and you have seen the metro inside is empty, but outside there are huge queues. So this disparity in the transport, public transport and social gatherings, this is all combined would lead to a surge which would be, nobody can guess, it would be a higher surge. This we can say, as the doubling rate is showing, every day the cases are being doubled. So we have to devise a method. Your program is in the right direction. We have to devise a screening type of methods, and probably the kits have been approved by the lab consortium in India and also ICMR, and we can push them out. And as Dr. Venkatesh is saying, there are cities, larger cities, they have their own genomic labs, but every place does not have it. So we have to augment the facility, which is a very expensive facility. And short of that, we can use the S-gene detection kits. This is very logical and very scientific. And beyond that, what we are doing is all academic. It does not tell us how to treat these cases.
Okay, Dr. Anil Arora, let me rope you in here at this point. With the rapid rise of cases, Dr. Arora, in, of course, Mumbai and Delhi particularly, do you believe more genome sequencing labs are needed, particularly in these hotspots and also in other parts of the country where cases are also rising, rather than samples being sent just to Pune? And also, sir, as far as testing infrastructure is concerned, will that also have to be relooked, looking at the developing situation?
Thank you, Uday, for very relevant questions. I think there are two important issues. If you go with the scientific principles all over the world, especially in the developed world, if you're able to sequence even 5 to 10% of the samples, that is enough to give you the epidemiological trend. But you should understand there is a limitation of testing. You know, you need at least 100 samples to put it in one genome sequencing lab. And on average, one lab takes around 7 to 10 days to give you the correct results. So in terms of management, it may not make a difference, but in terms of epidemiological assessment of the type of the virus which is circulating, it is extremely important. Certainly, given the infrastructure, given the financing and resources, this is a priority, but not for a developing country like ours. Even if we are able to sequence 2 to 5% of the population, that is good enough, whereas the standards in the US and UK is to the tune of about 10%. We do have kits, even a simple RT-PCR kit looks at 3 different genes, N, S, and E. So if by just routine screening, you find that the S component is missing, so that is one of the indirect indicators that you're looking at a Omicron virus. Then there is another test which is called SGTF test, that is a S gene target failure test, which is equally cheap. And if both can be done, then this is the subgroup of the patients who need to be sent for genome sequencing. If we keep sending all suspected cases of Omicron for genome sequences, I'm sure we do not have infrastructure, we do not have lab and manpower and expenses to look for it. So you need to have a screening test and try to figure out which particular set of the patient needs it. those who have traveled from abroad, those who have been in contact with confirmed cases of Omicron, and if S gene is missing, you can reconfirm it with SGTF test. If that is also positive, then you can send it for genome sequencing, which is the final answer.
Okay, Dr. Naresh Chawla, come in here as well on, on the relook, which of course currently is needed, sir, on the genome sequencing strategy and the testing infrastructure and testing strategy as well, looking at this situation. It's a new variant, there are new challenges, but it's something we need to grapple with and deal with immediately, looking at the way things are headed. Dr. Chawla. Dr. Chawla, I think you're on mute.
Dr. Chawla, you're still muted.
Yes, no,
Yeah.
Yes, I would agree with Dr. Arora and Dr. Wali that doing the genome sequencing is purely of academic value and if only from epidemiological point of view. So, as we are suspecting that this particular Omicron will spread much, much faster, and we may, all over the nation, may cross couple of lakhs within a week's time or a little more time. I think we need to find a test which provides us screening. So as gene dropout kit test is far more simpler, far more economical, it should be done. Number two, in Delhi itself, LNJPL Hospital, National Center for Disease Control and ILBS are doing this genome sequencing. So I think people will get confused and we may not be able to provide that big an infrastructure. So in the beginning, let us continue with RT-PCR only, which can at least tell it is a corona, number one. Number two, you are right that ICMR has approved this kit of S-genome dropout kit. So this be done at a major scale and the private entrepreneurs be taken in. Till now, all the things are in the hands of only the government centers. We do not have a very big infrastructure. So this kit should come to the private parties, private laboratories. And because I believe the way, if we take Delhi as an example, Delhi day for yesterday had something like 480 cases. Yesterday they had a little more, over 912. If it is doubling at the rate of every day, so I'm sure within 10 days we'll have a couple of thousands. So at that rate, the people will create panic. So we have to develop an infrastructure at a private labs rather than only government labs. The CM Kejriwal declared that all samples which are RT-PCR positive will be subjected to genome sequencing, which in my opinion is not perhaps required. So simple as gene dropout test to be done and at least patient be told that this what you have or not. And not forgetting that Omicron virus is a very mild virus, which is a 70% asymptomatic and 30% hardly mildly symptomatic. So my message to the people is need not fear. And my expert friend rightly said the South African authorities have clearly said Omicron is not a dangerous virus, it is a way out. Perhaps after it is a natural vaccine. Even if we all get infected by Omicron virus, we all will get a natural immunity. By the end of February, I personally believe that we shall all be free from all this corona thing. So it's a welcome thing. At this time, my advice to the general people will be only maintain the corona, observe the corona appropriate behavior, number one. Number two, vaccination. The booster vaccination is coming, starting for all the healthcare workers and frontline workers and 60 plus people with comorbidities by 10th of January. That'll be a very welcome thing. And for the children from 15 to 18 on 3rd of January. I personally, with this many preparations is good enough. Only thing we do not have to panic, but most important, people must observe corona protocol because that is the single most important thing. We don't know that Omicron becomes some other other variant. So we have not to lower our guard, and meanwhile we should prepare ourselves for better Omicron testing by getting these kits taken.
Dr. Arora, quickly going back across to you at this point, the basic point also is why none of the 28 INSA-COG labs are doing genome sequencing. Is this correct, sir?
Yeah, you see, in fact, that's not true. In fact, today only we have the data which is emerging from the ICMR and Pune National Immunology of Viral Lab that for the first time, they have been able to culture the Omicron virus. It's not that they're not doing it, but they're not doing it routinely all across the board, which is neither needed nor feasible the way the number of going up. There was a very good news today that a combination of ICMR and NIB project for the first time has been able to culture the Omicron virus, which is a big leap in scientific community, because once you have cultured the virus, then you can look at the reaction which occur because of the natural immunity or because of the immunity acquired by vaccination, the way the virus responds to different type of vaccination, the way the virus responds to different type of drugs, and the type of immune response it generates in animals. They are doing it, but not across the board, and neither it is needed, I think.
Okay, that's raising a big question of why that's not happening. Dr. Rao and Dr. Wali. Dr. Rao first.
Yes. See, the culture, like Professor Arora said, they have succeeded in culturing it, and the importance is twofold. One is for testing. There, you know which antibodies will work against it, which antibodies won't work, all that from the immune system part of it. And secondly, it is also helps in drug discovery. And most important, if Covaxin has to be, which is an attenuated vaccine, it has to be updated, then you need the viral culture, because that is what is cultured, multiplied, killed, and then tested and released as a vaccine. Now, as far as this, I don't know why who has said that only Pune is doing the molecular. As I mentioned earlier, and Professor Wali has also mentioned, there are about 30 odd labs around India which have been doing it. And as I said, there are 2 labs in Bangalore itself doing it. So it is not that we don't have the labs. Actually, the Karnataka government now has already said that they're going to have about 30 odd labs. There's going to be far more labs which will be recognized and given the facility. But like all my panelists are saying, it is basically not, what helps you is the epidemiological study to see which variant is dominant, what is happening. That is what it's more of a scientific study. So we don't need to worry just because some Western media, I saw that on Twitter, that Western media has blamed India, saying that because you people didn't do the molecular, genome sequencing, the Delta variant spread all over the world and created a mess. They are just trying to pass the blame on India, or they will blame anyone for whatever mess they are creating. It was wrong on their part. Once they had finished vaccination, to tell everyone, okay, now no need for mask, no need to, you can crowd around and enjoy yourself. This is where they got into the trouble. The thing is, mask and social distancing is the first line of defense and the most important line of defense, and it works against any mutation. Then comes the vaccine. These are different lines of defense. You can't just say that vaccination is done, so now you can do away with the outer defense. So, the lesson we all have to learn is we have to push for proper masks. Now, this mask business also, people see, in the beginning, we didn't have enough N95 masks. Now there are enough N95 masks. We should push and convince people that your best protection against this virus or any virus is the N95 mask.
Dr. Wali, quick word now. I'm running out of time. Dr. Wali.
My quick take on this would be keep doing genomic sequencing. Short of that, put those people who are COVID positive in RT-PCR on the screening method, whichever is approved by Government of India. All the people are not showing the same sequencing in the tests. Just now I read a news about a lady who was vaccinated, I don't know why, 4 times, 2 Covishield and 2 other vaccines. And she was not allowed to board the aircraft because she showed the screening test was positive. So this kind of set is also there in a population which is fully vaccinated. My take on this would be very simple. Don't get scared. Spot the patients who are more symptomatic. Isolate them. Those who are are non-symptomatic or mildly symptomatic, keep them waiting for 5 days for their genomic sequencing, if that is done, or a kit test, whichever kit is approved as per Dr. Naresh Chawla. In a couple of days, we would have a clear picture on this. What is more important now is that apply on yourself self-discipline, don't go out. Let the New Year celebration should be at low ebb, wear masks and exhibit COVID appropriate behavior from the heart. By now, because of you people, everybody knows what we are talking as COVID appropriate behavior. Everybody knows the importance
Yes.
of mask, but it is not by heart. Nobody is following.
Okay. Okay.
So,
I have to leave it at that, sir. I'm
Yes.
afraid we've completely run out of time. My thanks to all of our guests for joining.